Hey, Kua.
Hey, Kendra.
We're back.
We're back, y'all.
I know. We were just talking about how rusty we are. So,
Right? It's been a minute. It's been a minute since we recorded, obviously.
yes, but it feels like we've been having a lot of conversations in the past couple of months, and we've been busy doing a lot of different things. Booked and busy.
Booked and busy.
Which is a blessing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we're back.
Right?
And so we have a lot to talk about, but we wanted to have this intro episode to really just dive into kind of like what we've been up to. Because I know a lot of people have been asking us, like, where are you
Where'd
guys?
y'all go?
Where did you go?
What happened?
We didn't go anywhere. We just been really going out and doing the work.
Right.
And having really great conversations in our communities and outside of our communities. Yeah. So we'll talk about that in a moment too. But we're back and we're super excited.
Yeah, we are super excited. And I think, a lot of transitions have happened in this past, and I don't even know how many months it's been, y'all. It's been a little bit of time. But a lot of transitions have happened. We actually have an episode or two that we will be putting out that we recorded last year, right? We're calling it the Lost Tapes. Y'all remember Nas, the Lost Tapes?
Yep.
So we got our own Lost Tapes that'll be coming back just to kind of talk a little bit about some of the transitions that were happening last year into this year. One of them being...
Yes.
I left my...
Yeah, I was like, I don't know why you point at me.
I'm looking at you like the rustiness. But one of them being I left my full-time job last year, last April, and am out on my own as a full-time entrepreneur, owning my business, Clementine Gold Group, shout out. But yeah, we have an episode that we recorded really right after I left my full-time job. And so even kind of going back and listening to it, some of the gems that we dropped just in kind of that transition up to now. And, during the season, I'm sure we can get into some of the cool things that we're doing. We also got to shout you out because you got a lot of things happening.
There's a lot of
coming
things
out.
Yes.
Some transitions and things.
A little bit of transitions, new businesses and all that. So we'll talk about that too.
Exactly. So I feel like we got a lot to talk about, a lot to dive into.
Yes.
But we just wanted to kind of come back out and do a little bit of an episode to talk about what we've been up to this last... I don't know how many months.
It feels like forever, but it has been forever.
Yeah.
So, we are going to come out with the Lost Tapes. However, since, the last time we sat down and had a conversation with the people, because we talk all the time.
Right, exactly.
How do you feel being a full-time business owner, transitioning into that space, and then also owning that space into, evolving from where it was to where it is now? Like, how do you feel?
I could say that I feel good. Let's start there, right? Like I feel blessed to have the opportunity to work on something, it's like my baby, right? Like work on something that has been 4 years now, and getting to this point. We've been doing a lot of business. We've had a lot of business. We've grown our team. I think even since the last time we sat down. But I feel blessed for the opportunity to be able to work on my own thing. I will say that I finally feel... I don't know if I can say I feel rested because I feel like there's always something happening, always something going on. But I would say that I feel in a good routine now. Like I'm in a better routine because when we sat down the last time, I would say, I was working 2 full-time jobs. And so I had, that level, and it was a C-suite level position that I was at, as well as growing the business and managing clients at that time. But I would say I didn't take any time in between, right? I didn't give myself that rest.
Right.
Like my partner, she had some months to kind of like, reset and get into the full swing of things because she left before I did. But I finally feel like that rest has caught up.
Yes.
And so I'm in a better routine. I could say I'm taking care of myself a lot better.
Yes.
Getting into some regular routine things that I used to do. And so I'm feeling good from that regard.
Yes.
And just ready for what's to come. We got some clients we've gone deeper into the business with. I would say last year we were taking anything and everything just to kind of sustain us as we transition. But this year being a little bit more selective and going deeper with clients, which is really cool too. So
absolutely. I feel like we need to do an episode too about what does it look like owning your own, especially as the workplace is changing.
Right.
We talk about all the time. I know even for me personally, I'm like, Kua, I need to figure out this information about insurance, like business insurance, right?
Yeah.
So there's things about business ownership and what that entails. I feel like we need to dive deeper because so many people want to have their own now, but don't know exactly what that means.
I think we can talk about too, like just it's glamorized, really, like owning your own business. what the true reality is behind it. Because a lot of folks will be like, oh yeah, be your own boss and do this. But they don't realize, when you leave that full-time job, you leaving your insurance, you leaving your benefits, you know what I mean, that you had within that role, but you figure it out. Absolutely. And I think that's the biggest thing is, you got to be a problem solver before everything else. Yeah,
absolutely.
So yeah.
And then also too, didn't you in that time get MWBE?
I did. Status? Yeah. So we are now certified on the Erie County level, and we're in the fast track process right now for the state. So, got a little stamp, got a little certificate.
A little stamp, a big stamp.
Okay, you're right. Because we always be like,
you gotta hype your friends up.
You're right. You're right. Exactly. So we did that, and that'll bring more opportunities our way too. So doing all the things, man. It's been cool. It's been it's a good few months. But yeah, excited about what's to come.
Yeah, yes. And then also too, so fast track to the fall, we had the opportunity to go to Memphis. And Memphis is a special place, I think, for myself and both Kua. Yeah. My grandfather is from Memphis. And so being able, and I've never met him before. So he passed away before I was born, but being able to go back there from even when I was younger, going to family reunions and things like that, but now going back as an adult and really seeing the city for what it is and the history in Memphis is it was just amazing to see. But we had the opportunity to go to the Civil Rights Museum with Dr. Wigington and Delaware North. So,
and y'all probably will remember that name because we did a live podcast with him in Buffalo after the massacre that happened on 5/14. So lob it up in terms of like what got us to that point. What got us to
that point, yes. Right? So you know how people say all the time, like, oh, come on through. We would love to have you.
Right.
They were like, yeah, okay, I'll hit you up if I'm in that city. But really, when we had the opportunity, got the email from Delaware North to be able to go to the Civil Rights Museum, it was such an honor. And at least I didn't know what we were getting ourselves into.
Me neither. And that's the thing. Me and Kendra were looking at each other like, okay, so we have connection to Delaware North. Yes. Delaware North sponsored our live podcast with Dr. Wigington, who is the president of the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. But we did that live podcast here. He spoke life into us too, which was amazing. Just saying like, keep it up in terms of what y'all are doing, and literally invited us, right?
Yes.
And so Delaware North, they have business in Memphis and reached out to the both of us. Like, I know it's short notice. I want to say it was like, okay. See, exactly.
So it was short notice because we also too hopped across the pond.
We went across the pond, y'all. We went across the pond
to root on the Buffalo Bills in London,
which we won't even go there. We don't even have to go there. We enjoyed our time.
It was a great experience.
Exactly.
We also before that went to Amsterdam, and I remember being on the train from Amsterdam to London.
Is that when we found out?
A week before that. But I booked my flight literally.
I'm crying.
On the train from Amsterdam to London to go to Memphis. So I know. And then the following weekend,
it was like a week after coming back, right? Like, so, and people always want to comment on me and Kendra because we make moves. We make moves. So when people invite us to something or whatever, we're like, all right, how do we make this happen? Like, this is a cool opportunity. We want to make it happen, and they sponsored us to go. And so we made it happen. We literally left the pond, which we got to talk about that. That's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother story. We had a great time. Yes. But yeah, because we met Andre Reed, y'all.
We did. We were chilling on the rooftop, having drinks with Andre Reed and his wife. Yeah. That was a great conversation. I mean, and these are the things where like we always say we're just so blessed. Yeah, right?
Absolutely.
We are blessed. Yes,
absolutely.
We put in the work, but we are so blessed to be able to be in these rooms and have conversations with people like this. So,
right.
But yeah, so the week before we were in London,
in Europe, gallivanting.
Yes. And then the following weekend we went to Memphis. And, so again, we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. And the first night we were there, we were invited to, a tour of the museum and dinner.
And so even before that, cause I don't know, we didn't tell the people why we were invited, right? Yes. So it was for an event, a specific event, right? So it was the Freedom Awards. And I don't remember the annual number.
I can't remember,
Yeah, so it's the annual Freedom Awards that happens in Memphis, and that's what we were being invited to, right? And so they asked us to a tour and the actual event, which is like a gala, so you dress up, which we love to do, y'all. Yes. So dress up, went to that. But so what do we do first?
So when we walked up to the museum, first of all, the Civil Rights Museum many people think it's just it's at the Lorraine Hotel, but many people think it's just the place where Martin Luther King died, right? He was shot and killed.
Right.
But it's so much more than that. It takes you from the beginning, even before Black people arrived on this continent. It takes you from the beginning all the way into present day. And they are also too building a learning and education center as well across the street to talk about where are we now and where are we going based off of Martin Luther King's book. So it was a really robust, moving museum. But we, as soon as you walk onto the grounds, you see from the outside the Lorraine Hotel and where MLK stood right before he was shot. And it has, the cars and it was just really moving to see and touching. But as soon as we walk in, I'm looking around, I look at Kua and I said,
she's like, Kua.
That's Stacey Abrams.
Stacey Abrams sitting right there.
Now, mind you, it wasn't like a big sea of people. It was like maybe 4 or 5 other people in the lobby and Dr. Wigington. And then Stacey Abrams just hanging out.
And Carrie Kennedy.
And I'm like, what did we just get invited?
Like, what's going on? And I'm like, Kendra, that's Stacey Abrams. Oh my gosh. That's Stacey Abrams. So just kind of give some more context to the Freedom Awards. It was 3 people that were being honored. Stacey Abrams, Carrie Kennedy, who's the son of Robert F. Kennedy, and Dr. Clyburn Carson. And so the 3 of them were being honored at the Freedom Awards celebration that was happening the day after, but they were doing a private tour of the museum. And so, Dr. Wigington was surprised and happy to see us when we walked in, and, he greeted us and we got to meet a lot of the staff that worked there at the National Civil Rights Museum, which was dope. But then he's like, yeah, you'll get a chance to, we'll introduce you to Stacey Abrams. And we're just like, oh my gosh, like this is such a really, just a cool opportunity, right? That we didn't expect. We didn't know that we were going to be able to meet them. So the next thing, so they went off, like the honorees went off and had their tour. And then they gave us a tour guide, which was dynamic. I wish I remembered his name to shout him out because he was awesome. He
was great.
He was awesome. And so we did our tour and we went through the museum, which was moving, right? Like they had videos and multimedia and, they talked about the Montgomery bus boycott and they had the buses there. And then they talked about the incident that happened with the folks that worked in, it was like remember the trash? They had like the big trash dumpster truck.
The protest that happened in Memphis that what brought Martin Luther King to
Memphis in the first place, right? So even learning around that, just in terms of like the sanitation department and the I think it was just the makeup of what was happening around that time was dire, right? Like they didn't have safe conditions. There were a couple of deaths that happened that really sparked a lot of that tension. And that's what initially, brought Dr. Martin Luther King to that area. So you walk through that, you're looking at the stories. I just remember talking to you in those moments like, man, I know, and we're going to talk a little bit about like all the transition that's been happening in the US in this last few months. But I remember looking at you like, man, if they could make it through some of this stuff, we can, right? Like it was inspiring from that standpoint.
It was, and the visuals behind it. I mean, even just the visuals behind the Freedom Riders. What they went through and how they had a map of every time they went further and further down south. The more violence that they experienced. And one thing that stood out to me, I remember we looked at each other the day of May. May 5/14. May 14th, and we're like, is this a coincidence? That was like the biggest massacre that happened.
That's right.
Tied to the Freedom.
That's right.
Riders. So I mean, there was just so much that was happening in that moment. But we looked at each other and said, if they can get through this and push together. But one thing that also I thought about was that they gathered together collectively.
Yeah, absolutely.
They came together. It's like if one of us are boycotting, we're all boycotting, right? So that is something. There's so much lessons learned from that museum. That we can definitely take into modern day and apply it today as we're going through what we're facing today. In 2024.
Right. And you talk about like history repeating itself and just the gall that some of these folks had, a lot of these folks had coming together and pushing against, discriminatory practices and, unequal treatment at that time. But it was powerful to say the least. It was powerful to say the least.
So once we kind of took a breather, because at the end, So at the end, you walk into, so they kind of obviously go back into the motel, and they kind of took out that wall. But at the end, you go to where MLK's room was, and they kind of recreated, where his meal was and the scene and all that. And you heard his voice in the background. And that was a really touching moment. And I remember Dr. Wigington saying, when times get tough, and when things get hard, sometimes I go and I just stand here, and I stand here and say, I'm here for a reason. And so that was just, again, a very just powerful moment in everything. Yeah. And then, you go into the store, the museum the gift shop.
Which we always, we had a
green book.
We got a lot to talk about, y'all. But we went to the store. There was some really cool like jewelry and things like that. I think from Ghana, actually. Yeah. But then a lot of books and literature on just the movement in general. So, of course, Kendra and I, we're book lovers. So we bought up a bunch of books. And one of those books, just to kind of highlight, because I know we had an episode around the Green Book, but it was actual Green Book. And in that Green Book, so y'all will recall, that was a book where basically African Americans could travel to and be safe in certain areas. But it was cool because it was international. And so just going to Europe, we were like, okay, where in London could people go, right? The types of hotels and places that you could stay, the places you could eat, the places that you could be welcome in some of these countries around that time. Because you'll remember we talked about it in relation to the HBO show that had come out. Lovecraft Country, right? And so just these different connections. And so we flip it to Buffalo, and we're looking at all the places like on Broadway Avenue and places that existed. Michigan, the Colored Musician Club was on there. And so a lot of these historical places were in that Green Book. And so we were just kind of nerding over some of that because of our love of travel, of course.
Yes.
But after that.
So then after that, we walked into a room where they said, dinner is getting ready to be served.
It's a reception that we were invited to. Yeah.
And we walk in and we sit down, and I look to my left.
Yeah.
And at the head of the table, I'm like, we're really breaking bread with Stacey Abrams and Carrie Kennedy. Like, it was just a very surreal moment. And it was a very intimate moment too. Yes. It wasn't like a big gala ballroom. We're literally at the same table. It was probably
what, 20 people? 20 people?
And we all introduced ourselves. And the great thing about it is everyone at that table, first of all, said, I don't know how I got here.
Exactly. Yeah.
But there were people who I remember meeting a woman who was the lawyer for LeBron James and other NBA players' podcasts.
Al Roker's staff
was there. Yeah. And so just being able to connect with them, and even following up with Al Roker's staff, was able to get invited into a pre-show for a show that's going to be eventually on Broadway in New York City, where I was able to connect with them. And this is what I'm saying, the power of connection.
Yes, network.
Networking is so powerful. So, the one thing that I remember too at that table with Stacey Abrams and Carrie Kennedy.
And her parents, y'all.
And her parents.
So Stacey Abrams' parents, who grew up in, I want to say, I forgot where in Mississippi specifically, but they were sitting at the table too and talking about stories of raising her.
And that's where I was, And so one thing I was thinking was, as they were going through the museum, and Stacey was going through the museum, thinking about how they were still connected to quote unquote history. They're like, this is history, but this is what we lived through. Yeah. Right?
They said they saw some of their friends.
Yes. In the museum.
In the museum, in pictures describing, friends that they had lost in the journey of civil rights and in this movement. So it was a surreal experience. And we kept tapping each other under the table like, Kendra, is this real? Like, we're sitting here with the 3 honorees of the Freedom Awards and the staff of the National Civil Rights Museum and just other folks, because they're also in the process of doing a large campaign for the expansion that's happening too. But I could just say that lighted, like, it just lit a fire under us in a really dope way to say, okay, we got to get this back together, right? Like, we've been doing our own thing to get to this point, which is great, right? Like, kind of moving in that way, but coming back together as a collective and using our voice and our platform to really highlight some of the stories and things that we want to talk about here. Absolutely. So, man, it was a dope experience.
And then we went to Beale Street.
We did
go to Beale Street. Yes. So that was a really great
shout out to Nikki too. She took us around, Nikki. Gave us a little bit of a tour because we were only there for a few days, but it was a powerful experience. And we definitely plan to go back. I mean, the other connection that we had, which was dope too, is my godparents are in Memphis, and I hadn't seen them since I was probably a teenager, to be honest.
They're beautiful people. They gave me a Christmas card.
Yeah. Oh, did they?
They mailed me a Christmas card.
You know, if you're on the list now, you're going to get a card every season because we get birthday cards every year with just, you know, pictures of them and just well wishes. And so it was actually my Aunt Carol, which was my mom's roommate back at Fisk when they went to Fisk together. So it was just dope to connect with people that are near and dear to my heart. And we had a really amazing experience. Yeah. More to come on that, because we got some stuff kind of brewing and some conversations that could be had on that too. But so after that, what else have we been up to?
I think we took a small little just break, just in general. I mean, still working, still doing all the things, but I think we just kind of rested around the holidays. And now, you know, moving into February, Black History Month, it's like, we're back. We're back. And we have a lot to talk about. So many people have come up to us in the community and said, where are you guys? Like, we want to hear more from you. You know, so we're back. We're going to talk about a lot of these things that you probably have questions about. Things that you may be struggling in the workplace. You know, how is it tied to a lot of the politics that we're seeing today?
Because there's a lot that's been happening, right? And so we always talk about DEI and inclusive cultures on the podcast through a different, you know, a lot of different viewpoints and lenses. But at the end of the day, we know DEI is truly under attack right now. There's been a lot of, you think about like the pendulum in terms of all the progress that we had. And we started this podcast back in 2020 after
the momentum was going the other way.
The momentum was going the other way. You had George Floyd, his murder. You had the Black Lives Matter movement, which picked up steam. You know, I remember marching on Washington and people really getting back into this motion and movement to make change. And so it seemed like, oh my gosh, all these corporations were making pledges and money and, you know, really strategic directions for where they were going. And we're like, okay, we're in this motion and movement. And now that pendulum is swinging back the other way quickly, right? And so now you're seeing people pull that back. They're stopping, you know, a lot of their, you know, just the momentum in organizations. They done cut the funding. They done cut the positions. I remember around that time, we were talking about just one of the fastest growing positions was, you know, diversity officers in diversity positions and everybody really gaining momentum. They're also like the first that are being cut now, right? And so you're seeing that happen. People are saying, all right, we're just going to make it a function of HR again, and really removing the resources that were put behind it in the first place. And now it's like, now what? Now what we do? Now what?
And a lot of people are asking, now what? I mean, you see affirmative action.
That got struck
down. I mean, major decisions that happened in court years ago that were supposed to set precedent. I mean, you talk about affirmative action. We talked about Roe versus Wade. These are things that were supposed to set precedent. And now this justice system has literally swung the other way. So like, what are those implications? What are the implications when it comes to education? We're seeing it with Harvard, you know, all these different places, all these different things. So
because now there's, I mean, lawsuits on reverse discrimination that are happening, and there's very pointed attacks at things that really uplift Black and brown communities, specific monies that were designated for BIPOC communities and what that looks like. And now the same folks who really went after the affirmative action case with Harvard are now trying to strike down other areas. So like the Fearless Fund is often being talked about. And if that does happen, that sets a very nasty precedent.
It does.
You know, in that way. So what we going to do, y'all?
We have a lot. Well, in a few weeks, we'll be going to caucus.
That's true.
So we'll see what conversations are happening at the state level. You know,
and I went to Congressional Black Caucus in DC. Was that in October too? Yeah, we did a lot of. It was a lot of travel around that time, but just hearing the notion of we got to come together. A lot of the leaders, you know, in that area in DC were coming together just to talk about what is our new mission and direction, because y'all, it's bad.
You have to come together as a collective. That's the key word, is collective.
Right.
Whew, I just had to take a deep breath.
Me too, because it's a lot. Although, you know, there are some other organizations that I think have made even more of a stance since they've seen this. But there's some very, you know, specific folks who are really calling for the removal, calling for, you know, backing out of these initiatives and just saying like, no, now DEI is discriminatory.
Yes.
Now, if you have any efforts that are trying to uplift certain communities,
yes.
this is actually discriminatory to me. And now there's a big conversation around merit, which is a conversation that we need to have
yes.
On the podcast as well. And just some of the fallacies around meritocracy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what that looks like.
Because also, too, guess what? Yeah. They struck down affirmative action, but they didn't strike down legacy.
Child.
So,
okay. Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's a definitely a conversation around merit and what that looks like. But
right.
So we have a lot to talk about. And again, we always say this. If you have anything that you want us to talk about, let us know on our social media.
Yeah.
As well as just talk to us. And, you know, we're out in the outside. We are outside, but we out in the community. But talk to us, you know.
You know, so come talk to us. Shoot us a message on our socials. We're still active on there. So we've been posting mostly on Instagram, just in terms of the stuff that we've got going on. Same thing with Facebook, but shout out at us.
Yeah.
Come, you know.
And if you want us to even come in person and have a conversation, let us know, moderate something. So
right,
we'll
So we here, y'all. Yeah. We here. We're back. It feels good to be back.
It does.
And let's do this. We're gonna be talking and chatting it up like usual.
Yeah.
We got to end this with a gem.
I know. I was gonna say, do we have a gem? Gem of the day.
It's been gem of the time. It's been a minute.
I know. So I guess gem of the time. One thing that I stick to is grace, right? Mm-hmm. And always giving myself grace, but also to giving others grace. These last few years have been unprecedented. It's been a lot going on in terms of obviously a pandemic. You know, we're putting into these places to be leaders. But you have to give yourself grace in a lot of these spaces, and you have to provide it to other people as well. So that's just been my thing that I've been thinking about. And be kind to yourself. Yeah. I
actually had a quote that I'm going to read really quick too. Listen, I'm like, okay, one of my gem of the day, and this was on We the Urban on Instagram. And so one of my words actually for 2024, because I do like kind of themes of the season, not necessarily resolutions, because most of those, we stopped doing those. But one of my themes for this year is just being audacious. And so this quote says, stop being afraid to embrace your confidence. Life is too short to downplay what makes you unique. Other people's inability to handle your light is not a cue to dim it. And so this year, I think we're both in that space, right? Like being more audacious, more bold in terms of where we are going, but just excited, right? Like there's a lot that's happening, but we're needed in this work. Y'all are needed in this work. We have to really, truly come together as a collective. And I think that's a good note to kind of end on, right?
Absolutely.
We got to bring the collective back. This individualism and, you know, kind of being in your own little bubble is not going to work for what's kind of happening right now. So let's come together, y'all. Let's do that. So another episode in the books, the Lost Tapes.
Listen to the Lost Tapes.
The Lost Tapes coming out.
I'm really interested to hear it again to see what we talked about last and where you were at that time to, you know, now in February 2024. So.
Yeah. So we'll be back with another episode, but we'll see y'all next time.
Yeah. All right.
Peace.
Bye.